My son's lawyer froze the moment I walked into the courtroom. His jaw locked, eyes flicked down at the file in his hand, then back at me like he'd just seen a ghost holding a loaded gun. That expression, panic wrapped in disbelief, was the moment I knew I'd taken my power back. They thought I was some frail old woman, easy to manipulate, easy to erase. What they didn't know was that the very house they were trying to steal, the business they were quietly funneling money from, and the land they assumed was long forgotten. I owned it all, and I had come to collect. I'm Dolores Whitaker, 70 years old. For most of my life, I was the kind of woman who kept her voice soft, her head down, and her pain private. I played my part, wife, mother, widow, without complaint. That silence ended the day my own son tried to declare me mentally incompetent so he could control my estate. If you're listening right now, tell me, have you ever been betrayed by the one person you spent your whole life protecting? Because that's what this story is about. Not just betrayal, but what happens when a mother finally decides to stop begging for respect and starts demanding it, publicly, loudly, and without mercy. The morning it all started, I was trimming the edges of my garden. Nothing fancy, just a few tired roses and the rosemary bush my husband planted back in '98. It was the kind of morning that smells like coffee and regret. Quiet, predictable, almost too quiet. I was still in my gardening gloves when I heard the tires crunch the gravel. Grant's silver SUV rolled up fast, too fast for a visit. He didn't come alone. Melissa climbed out first, adjusting her overpriced sunglasses and checking her reflection in the side mirror, like she was headed to a magazine shoot instead of my front porch. Behind them, a third man stepped out, a tall, stiff-looking type in a navy suit with a briefcase. My stomach dropped. They didn't even knock. Grant opened the door like it was his house. "You should be resting, Mum," he said, eyes scanning the room like an appraiser. Melissa fake smiled and started rearranging the couch pillows like she was already redecorating. The man in the suit introduced himself as Mr. Callahan and said he was there to help with some documentation. That word, documentation, landed like a slap. Grant took out a thick stack of papers and dropped them on the coffee table. "It's time, Mum. We need to get things in order. The doctor said you might not be safe on your own anymore. Melissa and I have already toured a beautiful retirement community. It's got everything. You'll be comfortable." They had already booked the room, signed the initial deposit, scheduled the movers. I hadn't even been told. I sat in my own living room, in the chair my husband built with his bare hands, listening to my own child tell me I was being removed. Melissa pulled out a folder labeled Power of Attorney. "All we need is your signature, Dolores," she said. "It's for your own good. You can't keep living like this. You left the stove on last week. Grant's been worried sick." I hadn't left the stove on. I'd never left the stove on in my life. But the lie slid so easily off her tongue, I could tell it had been rehearsed. Then came the kicker. "We're going to sell the house," Grant added flatly. "Use the money to restructure my business. Melissa's been working with the accountant. You won't have to worry about a thing." I looked at my son, my only child. I raised him with late nights and bad knees, held his fevered body when no one else could calm him, covered his college tuition when my husband died suddenly, and I had to clean offices to make ends meet. Now, he looked at me like I was an obstacle, a burden. I said nothing. Not when Mr. Callahan started reading the legal phrases like a death sentence. Not when Melissa began pacing around the house, pointing out what could be updated for resale. Not even when Grant called me fragile. Because silence is not always surrender. Sometimes, silence is the sound of a knife being sharpened. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, eyes burning, unable to move. I thought about everything I'd built in this home. Every meal, every fight, every birthday cake, every picture frame on the wall. It wasn't just a house, it was my life in bricks and dust. And they wanted it gone. They wanted me gone. But I wasn't going anywhere, because what they didn't know, what even I hadn't remembered until that night, was that 22 years ago, my husband set up a trust. Quietly, meticulously, every cent he earned from his welding contracts, every parcel of land we invested in during the recession, even the storefront property where Grant's business sat now, all of it had been placed in my name. All of it. And the conditions were clear. The trust would remain sealed until I turned 70. The moment I did, full ownership and rights would transfer solely to me. I was no frail old woman. I was the goddamn owner of their entire lives. And I was just getting started. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table in the same chair Grant used to sit in when he was 8, kicking his feet and complaining about math homework. I stared at the contract they left behind like it was a crime scene. The power of attorney papers, the fake smiles, the lie about the stove. They had rehearsed it all. And I had sat there, listening to them dig my grave in my own house without flinching. But now my hands were trembling, not from fear, but from something sharper. Rage. By morning, I wasn't the same woman. I was still Dolores Whitaker, yes, but I had remembered who I used to be long before they started treating me like a burden. And now, I was ready to remind them too. I started with the safe, not the one in the closet. That one had been emptied years ago after my husband passed. No. I went to the old wooden chest in the laundry room, behind the piles of winter blankets, the one no one had touched in decades. I pulled out the key taped inside the sleeve of my husband's old navy jacket. He always said, keep it close, never explain. I never asked, never needed to. Until now. Inside the chest was a small fireproof box. Inside the box was everything. Bank statements, a notarized trust document, ownership certificates, titles, his handwriting on every page. A man who knew how to prepare for the worst because he never expected the best. He had named me the sole controller of a trust that held not just our house, but the land the house sat on. The building Grant's company leased space from. 2 rental properties, a dormant LLC tied to commercial real estate outside Cedar Hill. All of it. And the most important line was buried halfway down the trust. Control shall transfer solely to Dolores Whitaker on her 70th birthday, or earlier if deemed necessary in case of legal dispute involving next of kin. He knew. My husband had seen something in Grant I refused to see. Maybe he didn't want to say it aloud. Maybe he wanted to protect me from the truth while he was alive. But he knew, and now so did I. By noon, I had already called Sylvia. She was my husband's old legal partner before she moved to the coast. We hadn't spoken since the funeral, but the moment she heard my voice, she came alive. "I've been waiting for this call," she said. Within 2 hours, she had me connected with a trust litigator in the city. By sunset, I had an appointment, notarized copies scanned, and instructions not to speak another word to Grant or Melissa until we were ready to file. But I wasn't ready to stay silent. That evening, I cooked dinner like I always did on Thursdays: roast chicken, mashed potatoes. The smell filled the house like a ghost of better times. I even set the table. Grant liked butter on the side. Melissa liked the potatoes extra smooth. I waited. They arrived just after 6. Melissa walked in first, holding her phone like it was an oxygen tank. She barely looked at me. Grant followed behind her, acting like nothing had happened. He sat down at the table like he hadn't tried to legally erase me 12 hours ago. Smells great, Mum, he said, slicing the chicken. Melissa didn't speak. I watched them eat for a minute, then placed the folder on the table. Not the original trust, just a taste. A preview. Grant looked at it and gave that lazy smile he always used when he thought I didn't understand what was happening. "What's this?" he said. His voice didn't waver, but his hand stopped mid-cut. I kept my tone steady. "A copy of the trust your father left. The one you were never supposed to see. The one that makes your power of attorney completely useless." Melissa's fork dropped. Grant opened the folder. I watched his eyes dart across the page, faster and faster, until the smile vanished. "This isn't real," he muttered. "It's legal. It's binding. And it was activated the moment you walked into this house with a lawyer and tried to take what isn't yours." "You're confused," Melissa jumped in, voice tight. "You don't understand what we were trying to do." "You were trying to put me away so you could liquidate my assets," I said. "You both lied. You fabricated medical claims. And you thought I was too old and too quiet to fight back." "Mum, that's not how this went," Grant started. "We just wanted to help. You've been forgetting things. Melissa's been worried sick." I stood up, every bone in my body screaming, not from age, but from the weight of years of silence. "Don't pretend to care about my memory when what you really care about is my money. I've been managing this house, this land, these finances for 20 years without help. And suddenly, the minute you want a business loan, I'm a danger to myself." Melissa leaned back in her chair like she'd been slapped. "This is why we didn't tell you everything. You get emotional." "No," I said. "I get angry. There's a difference." I walked over to the cabinet and pulled out the deed to the commercial building where Grant's office sat. I laid it next to his plate like a dessert. "You rent from me, and come Monday, your lease is terminated, effective immediately." He pushed his chair back. "You can't do this. You wouldn't." "I already did." I turned to Melissa. "And the credit card you've been using for your little getaways to Palm Springs, the one tied to the trust. It's frozen. You'll need a new method to fund your spa trips." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I sat back down, calm, measured. The table was silent. "You thought I was too old to fight. But you forgot who raised you, Grant. I am not some fragile woman in a rocking chair. I built this life. I kept this family alive after your father died. And if you try to take one more thing from me, I will burn every bridge you thought you owned." No one finished dinner. Grant stood first, face pale, hand gripping his phone like a weapon he no longer knew how to use. Melissa followed him out. No goodbye, no apology, just silence. But it was the kind of silence I could finally live with, because this time, it was mine. The next morning, I changed the locks. Not just the front door. Every lock. Every room. The mailbox. The garage. I even called a technician to wipe the smart thermostat Grant had installed last Christmas. That wasn't a gift. It was surveillance. He thought I didn't notice the app on his phone, how he could control the temperature in my house from wherever he was. That ended now. By 10 a.m., I was at the bank. Sylvia had already prepped the account manager. The trust account was frozen for 24 hours while we reassigned digital access. I signed papers with a firm hand. I wasn't trembling anymore. I was rebuilding the walls they thought they could bulldoze, brick by brick. I stopped by the grocery store on the way home. Not because I needed groceries, but because I needed normal. I needed to stand under fluorescent lights and choose apples without wondering if someone was calculating my net worth. I needed to be the woman picking out produce, not the woman under siege. When I got back, there was a white SUV parked out front. Melissa's. She was on my porch in heels, pacing like a caged animal. I parked slowly, stepped out with my head high. She spotted me and marched straight over, phone in hand. "What did you do to the accounts?" she said, skipping right past hello. I secured what was mine. "You froze everything. I couldn't even pay the caterer. Do you know how humiliating that was?" I imagine it was a fraction of the humiliation I felt sitting at my own table being told I was mentally unfit. "This is retaliation," she said. "This is consequence." She stared at me like she didn't recognize the woman standing in front of her. Good. That woman was gone. "I need access," she said, more desperate now. "Grant's business needs capital. We have invoices pending, payroll coming up. You're tanking your own son's company." "My son's company runs out of a building I own, a building I can lock tonight. Shall I go on?" Her jaw clenched. The phone shook in her hand. "You're doing this to hurt him." "No. I'm doing this because he tried to erase me. There's a difference." I walked past her, unlocked my door, and shut it behind me. Slowly, firmly. She didn't follow. Inside, I exhaled. It felt like drawing breath after years underwater. I went to the kitchen, made tea, and sat down at the table. The silence in the house was no longer oppressive. It was power, but it didn't last long. By evening, Grant was on the front step. He didn't knock. He pounded. "Open the door, Mum," he shouted. I didn't move. He banged again, louder, then kicked it. "I'm not leaving until we talk." I opened the door, slow and controlled. His face was red, wild, unfamiliar. "You need to calm down. You cut off everything. The cards, the business account, the office lease. Melissa can't even get gas. You should have thought about that before you brought a lawyer into my house." He stepped forward. I didn't flinch. "You don't get to destroy our lives over one mistake." "You didn't make one mistake. You made a plan. You executed it. You tried to have me declared incompetent and institutionalized so you could steal everything your father and I built. It wasn't like that." "Then how was it?" He looked away, jaw tightening. "You don't understand what it's like running a business right now. Interest rates, inflation, clients pulling contracts. I needed help. You needed control. And you tried to get it by convincing the world I was crazy. Melissa said it was the best path forward. We'd have power of attorney. We could keep the house in the family. Protect you. Protect me by locking me away. It wasn't going to be like that. You already had a room booked." He stopped. That was the detail that broke him. "You had a moving company scheduled, and you thought I wouldn't fight because I'm 70, because I sit alone and bake pies and talk to dead flowers." His eyes darted, searching for footing. He found none. "I didn't know about the trust." "No, you didn't, because your father didn't trust you, and now I see why." He stepped back like I'd hit him. I closed the door. Not fast, not loud, just firm. Inside, I paced the hallway like it was a war room. I wasn't finished, not even close. That night, I drafted 3 letters, one to the leasing office Grant used for his business, informing them that rent would now be paid directly to me under a revised contract. One to my CPA, authorizing full audit access into any transactions where my name had been used as a co-signer. And one to Sylvia, asking her to prepare a cease and desist for any further attempts by Grant or Melissa to access trust funds. I slept soundly for the first time in weeks. The next day, a box showed up on my porch. No note, no name. Inside was my wedding album and my mother's necklace. Melissa's guilt, I assumed, or maybe strategy. Either way, I didn't care. It was a surrender, a small one, but I'd take it. 2 hours later, a call came from the property manager of the building Grant worked in. He'd missed rent. First time in 3 years. I told her to wait 48 hours, then begin eviction proceedings. By 6 p.m., Sylvia called. I just got word, she said. Grant's lawyer filed a temporary motion claiming undue influence. He's trying to get an emergency order to freeze the trust again. I laughed. For the first time, really laughed. Let him try, I said. I hung up the phone, walked to the window, and looked out at the porch where Melissa had stood, where Grant had pounded his fists like a spoiled child. They wanted me invisible, but now they couldn't unsee me. And I wasn't done, not yet. By the time the emergency hearing was scheduled, I was ready for war. The courthouse lobby buzzed with noise, suits moving like sharks, heels clacking, papers rustling. I walked through it with purpose. My cane tapped with every step, not because I needed it, but because I wanted them to hear me coming. Let them mistake the cane for weakness. Let them underestimate me one more time. Sylvia was already waiting at the bench outside courtroom C, reading over the latest filing with the calm of someone who had done this 1,000 times and never lost. She looked up, nodded once, then handed me a file folder. Inside was the final list of assets Grant and Melissa had attempted to freeze in the past 72 hours. My house, my retirement account, 2 rental properties, and the commercial space Grant still hadn't paid rent on. He had asked the judge to declare that I had acted out of emotional instability and malicious intent. He wanted to strip my legal control over the trust and put it in neutral hands. Neutral, meaning his. The door opened. Court was in session. I walked in with my head held high and my heels clicking like gunshots on the polished floor. Grant was already seated. Melissa sat beside him, lips tight, dressed just slightly too formal for a legal proceeding, like she still didn't understand this wasn't about image anymore. His lawyer stood up first, young, smooth, arrogant, the kind who used too much gel and smiled like nothing could touch him. He launched into a speech about mental decline, about age, about concern. He painted me as a woman unraveling, a mother lashing out irrationally, a danger to her own future. He used the word erratic. Then Sylvia stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply laid out the facts, the trust, the timing, the handwritten notes from my husband, the audio file where Grant talked about forcing me to sign, and the signed receipts from the moving company scheduled a week before they brought the lawyer to my house. She played it all like music. Then she sat down. The judge looked over his glasses, turned to me, asked if I had anything to say. I stood up. I didn't speak like a lawyer. I spoke like a woman who had been betrayed. I told them how my son planned behind my back, how my daughter-in-law weaponized my age, how they counted on me being silent, how they calculated my kindness as weakness. I spoke of the night I found the trust, how it wasn't revenge that drove me, but survival, dignity. The courtroom was quiet. Grant wouldn't look at me. The judge took a deep breath. His decision was swift. The motion was denied. Control of the trust remained solely with me. The courtroom exploded in noise. Grant's lawyer tried to object. Sylvia shut him down in 3 sentences. Melissa stood up, whispered something sharp into Grant's ear, then stormed out. He followed her seconds later, dragging his briefcase like a dead weight. We stepped out into the hallway. Sylvia smiled. That should have been the end. But I wasn't finished. The next morning I showed up at Grant's office building, lease in hand, property deed in my purse, and 2 security guards already briefed and waiting. Grant was in the middle of a client meeting when I walked in. He froze. The client turned. I smiled. This office is now under review for breach of contract and non-payment, I said. Effective immediately, you are instructed to vacate the premises. You can't be serious, Grant snapped. I laid the notice on his desk. The client stood up, eyebrows raised. I'm going to need to call you back, Grant said to the client. The man nodded, clearly uncomfortable, then walked out, fast. Grant's voice dropped. You're humiliating me, he hissed. I leaned in. You did that all by yourself. He looked around the office like he could find a way out in the air. This is your revenge. This is your education. He clenched his jaw. You'll regret this. I won't, because I slept just fine last night. How about you? Security escorted him out 30 minutes later. He didn't fight. He didn't shout. He just walked out, like a man who finally realized the floor he thought was beneath him never belonged to him at all. I locked the office myself. The locks clicked like music. Melissa called that night, from a different number. I didn't answer. She left a message. Her voice was softer now. Her tone almost humble. She said they wanted to meet, to talk, to explain. I saved the message, then I deleted the contact. Some doors don't reopen, especially not for thieves who smile while they steal. But I wasn't finished yet. I had one last move. 2 days later, I drove out to the edge of town. A plot of land. 10 acres, purchased by my husband before he died. Always left untouched. Now it would become something else. Sylvia had already filed the paperwork. A non-profit, the Whitaker Foundation, for elderly women pushed aside by family, for those who gave everything, then got nothing back. It would have counseling, housing resources, and a lawyer on retainer, funded fully by the trust, by me, because power only matters if you know what to do with it. And I finally did. The following Sunday, I hosted dinner, not because I missed them, because I was ready to end it. I sent the message through Sylvia. One final meal, one final conversation, one final stage. The table was set exactly the way they remembered it. The good china, the linen napkins, the roast in the oven. It all looked familiar, comforting, deceiving. They arrived late. Of course they did. Melissa walked in first, wearing a soft smile like none of this ever happened. Grant followed, more cautious, no tie, no blazer, just a man walking into his mother's house, unsure whether he was stepping into a home or a trap. He was right to wonder. Dinner was quiet at first. No one touched the wine. Melissa complimented the smell of the food. Grant said nothing. His eyes moved, calculating. I let the silence stretch. Then I stood and placed a thick manila folder in the center of the table. He stared at it like it might explode. I didn't sit back down. Inside that folder are copies of every wire transfer Melissa made from the trust over the last 6 months. Jewelry, weekend rentals, gifts, one payment to a boutique hotel under a name I didn't recognize. Grant didn't move. Melissa's face cracked first. She reached for the folder. I raised my hand. Leave it. She froze. There's more, I said. Receipts from the interior decorator you hired to remodel the house you thought you'd get once I was gone. Orders placed weeks before you showed up with that lawyer. I took a breath. And then there's the video. Melissa's voice dropped. What video? I reached into my purse and placed a flash drive next to the folder. Security footage from the bank parking lot. You and the man whose name matches the hotel booking. You kissed him before walking in together to access the trust account. That day, over 12,000 was withdrawn. Grant's head turned slowly, eyes burning into Melissa. She said nothing. "This is crazy," she whispered. "You think I didn't plan for this? You think I didn't anticipate how low you'd go? You both saw my age and thought it meant weakness, but I remember every insult, every fake smile, every time you whispered in my son's ear about how I was slipping." Grant finally spoke. "I didn't know about any of that." I ignored him. I was going to let this end quietly, let the court decision stand, let you walk away with your pride intact. But you couldn't help yourselves. You had to push further, lie harder. So now you get the rest. I opened the second envelope. Grant's name was at the top, a printed email thread between him and his accountant. It detailed a planned transfer of my home's title, dated 2 days before the emergency hearing. Melissa gasped. He tried to speak. I held up my hand again. "You were going to take the house regardless of the court's decision. You already had a shell company created. You were going to hide the transaction and tell me it was sold to a developer. You had a plan, a smart one. If I hadn't found the trust, I'd be in a care facility right now with no legal claim to the property I built my life in." Grant leaned forward. "Let me explain." I stayed standing. "No more explanations, no more lies. You came into my house, looked me in the eye, and tried to erase me. You played games with my mind, tried to convince the world I was broken. But I remember everything. And now you're both going to remember this." Melissa stood up suddenly. "This is revenge. This is justice." Her voice rose. "You're just an old woman with money and a grudge." I laughed, not out of humor, out of clarity. "And you're just a scared girl who thought stealing from a 70-year-old widow would be easy. But let me make something clear. I'm not old. I'm seasoned, and I'm done being quiet." Grant slammed his hand on the table. "Enough." I turned to him. "You haven't even seen the final piece." He paused. I pulled out a single-page document. It was a revised lease termination for his new office. Not the old one. The new one he secretly moved into while pretending he was restructuring. The one registered under Melissa's cousin's name to avoid detection. I had found it. "Effective immediately," I said, "your new lease is void, and your company is under investigation for tax fraud. That trust you abused is now pressing charges. The foundation Sylvia and I set up is a legal entity. You forged documents attached to its name." Melissa sat down. "This can't be happening." "Oh, but it is. And the beauty of it all is that you did this. Every step, every lie, every forged form, you wrote this ending yourselves." Grant leaned back in his chair, suddenly exhausted. "What do you want?" I stared at him. "I want you gone. Out of my life. Out of my house. Out of my finances. You have 24 hours to vacate the property you're squatting in, and you are never to contact me again unless it's through legal counsel." Melissa stood up slowly. "And me. You. You get nothing. Not an apology. Not forgiveness. Not one more dime." They stood there like two kids caught stealing from the cookie jar. Only this time, the consequences weren't a lecture. They were financial ruin, social disgrace, and the loss of everything they tried to steal. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. They left without saying another word. I cleared the table alone. For the first time, the silence wasn't empty. It was clean, sharp, and final. The fallout hit faster than I expected. The day after that final dinner, I received a call from the bank's fraud division. They had flagged a suspicious attempt to reroute the trust's monthly income stream into a secondary account. The name attached was Melissa's cousin, the same name tied to the fake lease agreement for Grant's new office. I didn't blink. I approved full cooperation with the investigation and sent Sylvia everything: receipts, names, emails, all of it. By noon, the Foundation's attorney had filed a formal complaint. By evening, the city's Small Business Bureau had frozen Grants LLC pending review. It wasn't just about the money anymore. This was a takedown, a reckoning, and I wasn't stopping until every piece of their little empire turned to ash. At 8 p.m., I heard tires screech outside my house. I didn't move. Less than 30 seconds later, fists pounded on my front door. I opened it slowly. Grant stood there, drenched in sweat, eyes wild, hair matted to his forehead. He pushed past me without asking. "You destroyed everything," he was yelling before the door even shut. "My company, my credit. Melissa's gone. I hope you're proud." He turned to face me in the center of the living room, breathing hard, chest rising and falling like a boxer who had just taken a beating. I didn't flinch. "You did this to yourself." He pointed at me. "No. You set the trap. You waited until I slipped, then you slammed it shut." I raised my voice. "You handed me the knife. All I did was stop pretending not to see it. You humiliated me in court. You tried to have me institutionalized. You humiliated me in front of clients. You lied about my health, lied about my memory. You tried to take my home." He fell silent. "You brought this on yourself the day you decided your convenience was worth more than my dignity." His voice cracked. "Melissa's pregnant." I didn't react. "She left this morning, packed her things, and said she couldn't take it. She blamed me. But this started with you. You ruined us." I stepped forward. "No. What ruined you was greed. What ruined you was convincing yourself that love meant ownership. You wanted my assets, not my safety, my silence, not my wisdom, and you broke yourself trying to get it." He stood there trembling. "You don't even care that your grandchild is on the way." "I do care, but I will not let you manipulate me with life you're not ready to protect." He collapsed onto the couch. "I didn't know what I was doing." "You knew exactly what you were doing. You just thought you'd get away with it." I turned and walked toward the hallway, but his next sentence stopped me cold. "Dad always trusted you more than me." I froze. He told me once that you were the spine of this family. I hated that. I thought he was wrong. I thought he said it to make you feel better. But maybe he saw what I refused to see. I said nothing. "You're not just stronger than me. You're smarter, scarier. I never had a chance." I turned slowly and looked at him. "You had every chance. I gave you my entire life, my savings, my forgiveness. Even after your father died, I still put you first. And what did you give back?" A fake smile and a pen with my name already signed. He buried his face in his hands. I didn't expect it to go this far. But it did. I sat across from him. "You had a choice. And you chose to be ruthless. Now you live with it." He looked up. "I'm going to lose everything. You already lost the most important thing." He blinked. "You lost me." We sat in silence, heavy, final. No drama, no screaming, just reality settling in like dust after a war. He stood. "I'll go. You should." He walked toward the door, hand on the knob. He paused. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "you clean up your mess. You own your shame. And maybe, just maybe, if you show me something real, something honest, I'll consider a different conversation." He opened the door, stepped into the night, and didn't look back. I stood alone in my living room, heart pounding, head spinning. The silence returned. But this time, it wasn't just final. It was earned. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and looked out the window. No one was coming back. No one was barging in. It was done. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt safe inside my own home. 2 days after Grant walked out of my house, I received a formal subpoena. He had filed a countersuit. The claim was absurd: emotional coercion, manipulation, elder fraud. He wanted the court to believe I had used my age and the threat of disinheritance to psychologically damage him and Melissa. He wanted access to the trust suspended. Again. And this time, he added a new request: custody over the pending foundation assets. It wasn't just desperate, it was suicidal. I read every page in silence, as Sylvia's team had already begun drafting the response before I even put the papers down. Still, my hands shook when I reached for my tea. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew this meant he wasn't finished. Not yet. 3 days later, we stood in front of a new judge. Different courtroom, same blood. Grant sat at the front, pale and jittery. Melissa was missing. I took my seat beside Sylvia, calm, controlled, calculated. Grant's attorney opened the session by painting me as a vindictive mother with unchecked power. He spoke of mental fatigue, generational misunderstanding, long-standing emotional pressure. It was dressed in legal vocabulary, but it stunk of desperation. Sylvia stood with a single page in her hand. It was a letter, signed by Melissa, dated the day after she left Grant. In it, she confirmed every financial transaction I had cited. She admitted to fraud, to falsifying bank records, to conspiring to remove me from my home. She detailed the plan in full. But the last paragraph hit hardest. She stated under oath that she had been manipulated into participating by her husband, who promised her access to family assets in exchange for silence. The courtroom didn't move. The judge leaned back in his chair, reading the page again. His fingers drummed once, then stopped. He asked Grant if he had anything to say. Grant stood, but he didn't speak right away. He looked at me, then back at the judge. He said the word regret like it weighed 100 pounds, but he didn't deny anything. Sylvia handed the judge a binder. Inside were statements from the trust, new security footage showing Grant at the leasing office the same week he forged my signature, and internal communications from the business he had quietly dismantled, trying to siphon funding from my foundation. The judge didn't take long. He denied Grant's motion. He reinstated my full authority, unchallenged. He imposed a restraining order on any contact involving foundation assets. He fined Grant personally for abuse of court resources. And then came the final blow. The judge ordered a public disclosure. All filings, all exhibits, all financial records. They would be unsealed for public access within 30 days, the legal equivalent of public shame. I walked out of that courtroom with my head higher than it had been in years, and Grant didn't follow. Outside, the sun hit me like a baptism. It wasn't just a win, it was a declaration. I was no longer surviving, I was standing. I was walking into the next chapter, not because the law had defended me, but because I had defended myself first. That night, I unlocked the back office of the foundation building. It still smelled like drywall and paint. I walked the halls barefoot, letting the chill of the tile remind me this was real. It was mine. Not just the walls or the paperwork, but the purpose. The following morning, Sylvia called. There was a package waiting for me at her office. No return address. Just my name in bold black ink. Inside was a photo. Grant, sitting alone on the steps of what used to be his office, his face hollow, his hands in his lap. No note. No explanation. Just a photograph. I said nothing, because some messages speak loudest when no words are used, and some consequences need no narration. He had tried to bury me, but all he did was plant the seed. And now, the roots were everywhere. A week after the hearing, the papers hit the public archive. Grant's financial records, the false medical affidavits, Melissa's confession, the trust violations. It was all out. By mid-morning, 3 news blogs had picked up the story. Not national, but local enough for our town to know every dirty detail by lunch. That same afternoon, Grant showed up at the foundation. He didn't knock. He stood just inside the front glass, eyes sunken, tie crooked, like a man who had been running with no direction for days. I didn't ask the receptionist to hold him. I let him in. He followed me to the conference room in silence. I sat. He didn't. His voice cracked immediately. They pulled my business license. I said nothing. He lowered himself into the chair across from me, moving slowly, like his bones had aged 10 years. I had to sell the condo. Still nothing from me. Melissa is staying in Santa Fe. She says the baby will be born there. She doesn't want to come back. That one pierced. I felt it, but I didn't let it show. He wiped his face once with his sleeve, hands shaking. You win. That made me sit straighter. This was never about winning. He scoffed. Don't lie to yourself. You wanted to destroy me. And you did. I looked him dead in the eye. No, I wanted you to understand. You called it war. I called it survival. He leaned back, arms folded across his chest. Well, now you've survived. Congratulations. You still don't get it. Then explain it, he snapped. Explain how a mother ends up in court, fighting her own child like an enemy. I leaned forward, voice steel. You put me there. The minute you walked into my house with that lawyer, you turned this into a battlefield. You called me incompetent. You lied about my mental health. You let your wife drain my accounts while you plotted to evict me from the home I raised you in. He opened his mouth. Don't speak. He shut it. I gave you everything. Not just money. Time. Years. My body. My marriage. I buried your father alone while keeping your future together, and you repaid me with paperwork and fake concern. He looked down. I was drowning. So you pulled me under with you. I didn't know what else to do. Then you should have done nothing, because what you did broke something. And it's not as easy as coming in here and announcing your losses like I should feel sorry for you. He swallowed. I came to say I'm sorry. No. No. He blinked. You came to relieve your guilt, not to fix what you shattered. You want me to soften, to say we're family, but you forgot what that meant a long time ago. I stood up. And now you're going to feel what it's like to be powerless, to sit in silence and watch someone else decide what happens next. His voice was lower now. I don't want anything from you. Good. He followed me with his eyes as I walked to the door. But if I could do it differently, I would. Too late. I opened the door. Grant stood, hesitated, then walked past me and out the door without looking back. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. But when I sat back down in that chair, alone, the air felt heavier than it had in weeks. The next morning, the local paper printed an editorial. The title was short. The Last Line of Defense. It was about women like me, women who raise empires only to be discarded when they're no longer useful. It quoted statistics about elder exploitation, cited case law. But at the heart of it was my story, my fight, my voice. I read it with my tea in hand and the sun on my back. They didn't call me bitter. They called me brave. And for the first time since all this began, I let the words land without flinching, because I knew I had earned them. Every syllable, every scar, every breath I had used to defend what no one else thought I still had. Myself. 3 days after that conversation at the foundation, Grant showed up again. This time, he didn't park out front. He didn't knock. He didn't come through the main entrance. I found him out back, standing under the old tree his father planted the year he was born. Hands in his pockets, eyes glued to the dirt like it held all the answers he had run out of. I didn't say anything at first. I just watched him. He didn't flinch when he noticed me. I thought maybe if I stood here long enough, you'd remember the version of me that used to matter. He was thin, paler than I'd seen him. The edge in his voice was gone, replaced by something quieter, something heavier. I don't forget. I said that slowly. He nodded once. But maybe I do. Or I did. Somewhere along the line, I convinced myself that money could fix anything, that if I just gained enough control, I'd never feel weak again. And instead, you made me your target. He looked away. That's not how I meant it to happen. But it's how it did. He walked a few steps, the crunch of gravel under his shoes the only sound between us. I wasn't always like this. No, you weren't. But that didn't stop you. He turned sharply, his voice rising. You think I don't know that. You think I haven't replayed every mistake 1,000 times in my head. I destroyed everything. My name, my family, my own damn reputation. And for what? For a business I don't even believe in anymore. For a woman who never actually loved me. For some image I thought would impress a room full of people who never cared. He broke then, shoulders sinking, a grown man folding in on himself like a scared boy. I used to be proud of who I was. Now I can't look in the mirror. You wanted to be feared. You got it. I wanted to be safe. And I failed at both. I didn't say anything. I let the silence hold. Because sometimes the silence says what words never can. Eventually, he looked back at me. I know I can't fix it, but I can try to clean it up. If you let me. I stared at him for a long time. You think helping around the foundation is going to wipe away what you did? No. I think maybe if I show up, really show up, I can learn how not to be the man I became. And what about the baby? He exhaled hard. I haven't spoken to Melissa since she left. She doesn't answer my calls. Her attorney says she'll file for full custody. I think she's right. You wanted control, and now you've lost the one thing you should have protected first. He looked gutted. You're right. I don't deserve to be a father. Not yet. But if I'm ever going to become someone worth knowing again, I have to start here. I crossed my arms. If I let you in, even for a minute, it's not because I forgive you. It's because the foundation needs hands, and you clearly have nothing left to lose. He nodded, eyes not leaving mine. Understood. You take orders. You don't question what I say. You don't walk around here acting like my name doesn't mean something. You work until your knuckles bleed, and then you work harder. I will. And you don't speak about family, not to me. Not yet. You've lost the right to that word. I'm aware. I paused. Start tomorrow. He almost looked surprised. Thank you. Don't thank me. Prove it. He didn't smile. He didn't try to hug me. He just nodded again and walked away. And that was enough. The next day, he showed up early. He was already sweeping the parking lot when I arrived. By noon, he had stacked 3 pallets of supplies, fixed the broken light in the back corridor, and volunteered to run flyers to the senior center downtown. He didn't make small talk. He didn't ask for praise. And every time someone asked who he answered the same way. Just a volunteer. For once, he understood what it meant to earn space. Later that week, Sylvia pulled me aside. Her expression was unreadable. He's been showing up early, staying late, not asking for a cent. No complaints, no attitude. I know. It's strange. It's progress. I walked into my office and sat behind the desk, looked around at what I had built, what I had fought for, what they tried to take and what I refused to surrender. This wasn't forgiveness. This was accountability. And for once, Grant was carrying the weight himself. It was the beginning of something, not healing, not yet. But maybe one step closer to it. 2 weeks into Grant's volunteer work, the air started shifting. The whispers slowed. The staff stopped watching him like a liability. He cleaned, filed, ran errands. He didn't try to lead. He didn't push. He stayed in his lane. And for once, he listened. I never told him he was doing a good job. He never asked. But one Tuesday morning, the receptionist walked into my office holding a letter. She handed it to me without a word. The envelope had no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A court filing. Melissa had named Grant as the father in a pending custody case in Santa Fe. But it wasn't just about custody. She was formally requesting that he be denied visitation. She claimed emotional manipulation, abuse of power, financial deceit. And worst of all, she had attached excerpts from their text messages, screenshots of Grant offering to falsify documents in exchange for her silence during the trust battle, promises of a second house, promises that he would handle me. I read the words once, then again. I handed the letter to Sylvia without saying anything. She read it, jaw tightening with each paragraph. He has no idea, I said. He doesn't. And when he finds out, you need to be ready. I already am. Later that day, Grant walked into my office with a clipboard. There's a leak in the back room. I think it's just a valve. I can grab the part from Home Depot if you approve the run. I nodded. He started to turn. Wait. He stopped, slowly facing me. Sit down. He did. I handed him the letter. He read it fast, eyes darting line to line, and then slower. His hands trembled, his breathing picked up. But he didn't speak until he had finished the last word. He lowered the paper. She's using everything I said. She's protecting her child. He stared at the floor. I never thought she would do this. You never thought it would matter. He didn't deny it. You offered her thing that weren't yours to give. You wrote checks in my name and promised her a future built on my silence. And now she's choosing to keep her child away from that version of you. I know, do you? I'm not the man in those messages anymore. Then prove it. How? Take responsibility. He looked up. To the court. To her. To your future child. You don't fight this. You own it. You don't argue. You don't deflect. You tell the truth, even if it costs you everything. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You think that'll fix it? No, but it'll fix you, and that's what matters now. He stood slowly. Then that's what I'll do. That night, I sat in the foundation office alone, lights off, street lamp glow spilling through the blinds. I thought of the boy Grant used to be, the way he used to run across the yard barefoot. The first time he lied about breaking the window. The way he had cried, not because he was caught, but because he had let me down. Somewhere along the way, that boy buried himself under layers of ambition and fear. Now, maybe, he was clawing his way back. 2 days later, Grant filed a response in court. He admitted everything. He submitted a notarized letter accepting full financial responsibility for any damages caused to the trust. He acknowledged that he had attempted to manipulate both me and Melissa. And most shocking of all, he waived his right to immediate visitation. He requested supervised contact, only when and if Melissa deemed it appropriate. He asked the court for mercy. He didn't ask for forgiveness, and that mattered. The story hit the news again, but this time, the tone was different. They didn't call him a villain. They called him a man facing consequence. Some hated it, some applauded it. I just watched it unfold without flinching, because I knew what came next would matter more than headlines. 3 days later, he walked into my office. I did it. I know. I told the truth. You should have done that months ago. I know that too. He sat across from me. Do you think I have a shot? Not with Melissa, not with the court, with myself. I looked at him for a long time. You have one if you keep going. He nodded. That's all I needed to hear. I stood up, walked to the filing cabinet, and pulled out a document. I laid it in front of him. What's this? A proposal. Part-time work. Paid. Conditional. 6-month probation. You keep proving yourself, we make it permanent. He stared at it. Why now? Because accountability deserves opportunity, but it doesn't deserve comfort. You'll earn that, or you won't. He reached for the pen, and for once, I didn't stop him. Grant signed the contract in silence. He read every line, every clause. His hands didn't tremble this time. There was no rush, no bargaining, no negotiation. When he handed it back, his eyes were steady, and for the first time in years, I believed him. The shift was subtle at first. He arrived early every morning. He didn't just do his job. He noticed things, staff who looked tired, visitors who needed more than paperwork. He stopped watching the clock. He started listening. I kept my distance. This wasn't about family. This was about rebuilding trust, brick by quiet brick. 2 weeks into his probation, I called him into the meeting room. Not for discipline, not for praise, just information. We're expanding, I said. A new location on the east side. 3 stories, more beds, more programs. He nodded slowly. You need me there. I need someone who understands what failure looks like, who's lived through it, and who isn't afraid of standing in front of people who've lost everything and saying, me too. He didn't smile. He didn't thank me. He just said, I'll be there. But not every story stays clean. 4 days later, Melissa's lawyer filed an emergency petition. She claimed Grant's public presence at a foundation serving vulnerable women was triggering. She cited past behavior, past threats, and demanded his removal from all programs and leadership roles. She attached a therapist's note. It wasn't aggressive, but it was firm. The board called a vote, 8 members, all eyes on me. It was procedural. They wanted to follow the rules, maintain transparency. And so did I. The meeting was quiet at first. Then Sylvia cleared her throat and began reading the full timeline of Grant's involvement. His mistakes, his restitution, his accountability, his silence. Then I spoke. I didn't defend him. I laid the facts down flat. He broke every sacred boundary a son could break. He tried to take what didn't belong to him. He lied. He stole. He manipulated. But he also confessed. He didn't fight the consequences. He didn't spin the story. He stood there and took it all. And then he started showing up. I took a breath. Redemption doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering fully and showing up anyway. The vote passed 5-3. Grant would stay, but under clear boundaries, no leadership title, no public face of the foundation. His job would remain hands-on, behind the scenes. He accepted it without a word. The next morning, he was there before the lights turned on. He replaced the hallway bulbs, carried in a shipment of food, answered phones when the admin had a sick child, quiet, reliable, present. But the weight of Melissa's petition hung heavy. He didn't talk about it. Until one evening, when the staff had gone home, and he came into my office, eyes dark. She wants to erase me. I leaned back. You erased yourself long before she ever tried. He nodded. But I'm trying now. Trying doesn't guarantee you keep what you lost. I'm not trying for her. I'm trying for the baby. He sat down slowly. I want my child to know the truth, not the excuses, not the damage, just the truth. Then start writing it. What? Your truth, your shame, your failure, your choice to change. Start writing it, 1 page a day, not to fix anything, just to document who you're becoming. He didn't respond. The next day, a notebook sat on his desk. Blank. By the end of the week, the first 3 pages were full. On Friday evening, Sylvia handed me something before she left, an invitation. Melissa's attorney had extended a request for Grant to attend a supervised family counseling session. Voluntary, 1 hour, 1 time, 1 chance. He didn't know yet. I put it in my drawer and waited, because timing is everything. And some chances are only worth taking if the person reaching for them isn't the same one who burned the bridge in the first place. That night, I walked the halls of the foundation. Empty rooms, clean sheets, soft lamps. I thought of all the women who had passed through here, the ones who left healed, the ones who didn't, the ones who found their voice, the ones still searching. I thought of the woman I had once been, alone, betrayed, stripped down to nothing but memory and fury. And I thought of the woman I had become, not bitter, not broken, but forged by fire and ready for what came next. I handed Grant the envelope that morning, plain, unmarked, quiet. He looked at it without touching it. Then finally he said, I'm ready. He opened it. The invitation to the supervised counseling session was still crisp. I had waited until I saw in him not perfection, but persistence. It was time. He stared at it for a long while, then nodded once. The session was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon. The room was small, neutral, full of soft chairs and softer silences. A counselor sat between them. Melissa sat across from him, arms folded, jaw locked. She had every right to be guarded. Grant didn't beg. He didn't grovel. He didn't explain. He spoke plainly. I did things no father, no man, no human being should do. I lost myself in greed, in pride, in fear. I hurt you, I failed you, but I'm not here to ask you to forget it. I'm just here to say I see it now. I live with it. And if one day there's room for a different version of me in our child's life, I'll keep showing up to earn that space. Melissa didn't respond right away, but she didn't leave either. By the end of the hour, she hadn't forgiven him, but she had looked him in the eye. For the first time, in nearly a year. That was enough. Sometimes healing starts in a stare that no longer burns. Weeks passed. The foundation's expansion broke ground. Staff numbers doubled. Sylvia took on a new director role. I began training younger counselors, and Grant kept showing up. Early, silent, steady. He worked quietly behind the scenes, unloading shipments, managing records, overseeing logistics. He never asked for recognition, never sought forgiveness. He just worked. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I found a small box on my desk. Inside, there was a printed photo. It was of my son, sitting on the edge of the playground behind the foundation, holding his daughter. Not staged, not forced, just quiet. Melissa had taken it and sent it with a single sentence. "We're not there yet." But I saw him, really saw him, and I think maybe so did she. My breath caught in my throat. I held that photo like it was made of glass. Sometimes justice is not a courtroom gavel. It is the long, slow rebuilding of what someone tried to destroy. Brick by brick, breath by breath. Sometimes it is not revenge that brings peace. It is clarity, boundaries, and the refusal to be erased. I didn't need to destroy him. I needed to redefine myself outside of him. And I did. The foundation wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every woman who had been dismissed, reduced, forgotten. It was their space, their voice, their beginning. I watched Grant pack up for the day one afternoon. The sun was setting. He looked older, softer, not broken, but reshaped. I walked over and said one word. "Thank you." He paused, looked up. For what? For becoming someone I could thank, without regret. He didn't answer, just nodded, and walked out the door. I stood there a while longer, alone in the hallway, lights dimmed, walls warm. I wasn't the woman who walked into that courtroom in silence anymore. I was the woman who made the judge freeze. Because sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is not scream. It's to rebuild everything they thought they had taken, and then walk through the door, taller than ever. If this story resonated with you, tell me what part stayed with you most. Have you ever rebuilt something from the ashes, not to get back at someone, but to find yourself again? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Thank you for being here.